Our guest today used to get blackout drunk. She lost her memory, almost died, but she survived and created a tribe of people looking to change their relationship with alcohol. Janet Gourand is the founder of the community and podcast Tribe Sober. She's here with us today to talk about alcohol blackouts, the dark sides of drinking, and the light that emerges when you quit. This is my conversation with Janet Gourand. So today I would like to talk about alcohol blackouts. And let's start with a little story or two from your life. Let's start with a little story.
Sure. Let me give you my sorry tale of a blackout, because I drank for 40 years. And during my long and undistinguished drinking career, I had many brownouts, I think they're called. That's when at the end of the evening, things were a bit blurry. I'd wake up the next day and I'd be looking for my jacket and my handbag because I couldn't really remember getting home and bringing everything that I should. Invariably, they were there, but my memory was fragmented. And that's what they call a brownout. That's when the blood alcohol level is at a certain level. But when you go beyond that, then you're in blackout territory. And the blackout story that changed, actually, I'll tell you two blackout stories, and you can edit one out if you don't want to.
No, I mean, keep them both. Load them up. Load her up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're interesting because they're about 30 years apart. But my very first blackout story came when I was 25 years old. And at that time, I lived in an apartment in London with three other women. And, we all used to have a glass of wine or two in the evening, but we weren't kind of crazy alcoholics or anything. And we all had good jobs and everything was highly functional. But occasionally I would go over the top and think, oh, drank a bit much last night. But there was nothing dramatic going on, apart from when we got to this one evening. And we were hosting a party. We were quite excited, because we got loads of people coming and we were all dressed up and we started preloading like you do. And then the people came and we had a great time. And the next thing that I remember was waking up in hospital the next day. And what had happened is about midnight, I mean, obviously I have no memory at all of this. My flatmates told me the story. About midnight, I disappeared. I announced to one of them that I was going to bed because I was tired. So what I did is I went in the bathroom to have a bath. And I was obviously on automatic pilot because I always used to have a bath before I went to bed. So I went in the bathroom, locked the door because there were people in the apartment, got in the bath and passed out. And thanks to one of my caring flatmates who came and kind of banged on the door and said, "Are you all right there?" She must have seen I was a bit away with the fairies. And I didn't reply. And she just panicked then and she called the emergency services. So the fire brigade turned up, the medics turned up, and they knocked the door down. And I was under the water. So they had to drag me out of the water and resuscitate me. And it was crazy. When I look back on that, I think, oh, my God. But at the time, do you know what we did? We just turned it into a funny story. And that morning in the hospital, they sent a psychiatrist to say, I think we should talk about your drinking. Were you trying to kill yourself? And I said, no, I was just having fun. And but I didn't do anything about it. It didn't really frighten me at all. It was just a funny story. Did you hear about Janet in her bath? What an idiot. So that was blackout number one. And then I had all these blurry things and maybe another couple of blackouts. But the most serious one came when I was at the ripe old age of 63, still drinking too much. And what happened then is I was away with some friends for a weekend. We'd rented a house together. It was a boozy crowd. There were maybe 10 of us in this big house by the sea. It was beautiful. And it was one of those weekends where you start drinking at breakfast time. So we were all on the bubbly at breakfast and it just carried on through the day. That was the Saturday. The Sunday, I woke up feeling terrible, no memory of the previous afternoon. But being British, we have this stiff upper lip thing going. So I was smiling and pretending to be fine. And at breakfast, I said in this chirpy little voice, "Oh, let's walk down to the next village today. I've heard it's really pretty." And there was this weird hush over the breakfast table. And they looked at me and they said, "Janet, we did that yesterday and you were with us and you were walking and you were talking. You didn't seem particularly wasted." So I had no memory of about 6 hours of the previous day. And that was it for me. That really frightened me because I think I knew that I'd been damaging my body by then because I'd had breast cancer. But this was different. I did not want to mess with my brain. So that was it. That scared me and I stopped. And that was 9 years ago and I haven't had a drink since.
Yeah, that's very, very scary. Can you describe more about what exactly is scary about it? Yeah, it's common sense. We don't want to bust our brains. It kind of controls and helps us with everything in our life. But yeah, what sort of like gripped your heart in that moment? Like, oh no, I don't want it to be like this. I don't want this to happen. What were you scared of?
Well, I started Googling like you do. I thought, what is going on with these blackouts? And it's not that you can't remember stuff, but it's because your brain is so soaked in alcohol, you can't even make memories in the first place. So we get to a certain level of alcohol saturation in the blood and we get brownouts, drink more, and then we get blackouts. And what happens is it closes down the part of our brain that makes memories. I think it's the hippocampus, it's called. So it just shuts that down, probably to protect us in some way. The short-term memory keeps going, though. That only lasts about 2 minutes, but that's why we can have a conversation. That's why we can be relatively functional, even though we're in a blackout. So the more I learned about this, the more scared I got. And that's why in a blackout, we tend to repeat ourselves because the long-term memory isn't there. So we don't know that we actually said that thing 10 minutes ago. So repetition, classic sign of a blackout, and glazed eyes as well. If they'd really looked at me, they probably could have noticed something. I mean, the brain is literally unplugged. And I found that really frightening. And they also said that there's if you scan the brain when it's in that state, there's a similarity between early onset Alzheimer's. And I thought, well, I don't want that. It's really time to get serious now.
Yeah, can you dig a little bit more into the neurophysiology of these brownouts and blackouts? Maybe some differences between the two of them, or there might be phases in the night, or blackouts or brownouts getting worse over time. You mentioned the hippocampus. Are there any other parts of the brain that will be involved in this that would be relevant for these blackouts and brownouts?
Well, you're the brain expert rather than me.
Becoming,
but,
I know.
Yeah.
Give me another 20 years.
But the brownouts, I would say to anybody that's listening to this that has either of those things going on, the brownouts or the blackouts, please, take it seriously, because I interviewed a professor of neurology or something for my podcast a while ago. I told him about that 6-hour one, and he said, what you experienced is a precursor to brain damage. So that's why I decided that, I had to get serious about changing my drinking. And then as part of my research, I got hold of this book about blackouts. And this book talked about really serious blackouts, and it explained that many of our prisons are full of people that have done terrible things in alcoholic blackouts. They've woken up the next morning in a jail cell with no memory of what they've done. And I also read a story that always stayed with me. It was a young guy, early 20s, and he'd gone off to stay with some friends. They were going to have a bit of a drinking session, and he'd taken his sleeping bag because he decided that he wouldn't be able to drive home, so he was going to sleep there. So they had lots of drinks, and then, as far as he was concerned, he went to sleep. But what really happened was he woke up about 2, 3 o'clock in his blackout state and decided that it would be a good idea to go home. He just wanted to go home. You know what it's like sometimes when you're staying away. And what he did was he got in his car and he drove. And he drove the wrong way round down the motorway and head-on collision and killed 4 people. So he woke up seriously ill in hospital the next day with no memory of this terrible thing. And wow. So the more I dived into this, and then of course there's Sarah Heppeler's story that is much lighter than that and really funny in parts. I meant to reread the whole thing before we talked, but I didn't get time. But I did glance through the first chapter, and she describes it beautifully. She says things like, yeah, certain part of the evening, a curtain comes down. I know what she means by that. And she also talked about the morning afters, and I remember these well. And she said it's like being a detective. You have to piece together what happened. I would wake up in the morning after a problem drinking night, and I would look at my husband's face. That was my first clue. And the more grim his face was, the more serious I knew that my behavior had been. So, and the idea, of trying to piece together these things that had happened the night before, I can really identify with what she's talking about. And of course, in her book, she wakes up in Paris in a hotel room on top of some guy that she had no idea who he was. I mean, it's just horrific.
And everyone's going to have different clues or pieces of data that emerge the following day. It'll be messages on your phone. It could be your fitness tracker telling you went all these places or you walked however many steps. It could be bruises and bleedingness and whatever injuries. It could be like, you might wake up in a hospital or in a jail cell or something. There's all kinds of crazy pieces of data that can pop out of this. And maybe it also tells you a little bit about yourself too. Like, whoa, this is what I do. Like, these are my deep habits. Like in my case, I wake up, I do have blackouts as well, which is another reason why I tend not to drink. I'll wake up with like these notebooks full of notes and scribbles and recordings in my phone of like ideas and stuff. And a lot of it is pretty junk, but I will sometimes find something within that wreck. What kinds of things do you find the following day?
I certainly don't write. I wish that I did because I enjoy writing, and I've got a friend who's a writer, and he often writes at 3 o'clock in the morning after he's been drinking. And he said he does some of his best writing then, but he also writes a lot of junk as well. And he doesn't believe that we have to drink to be a good writer. And I always think of Hemingway, who was obviously a fantastic writer, but by the time he got to his 50s, his brain was damaged and he could hardly string a sentence together because of decades of crazy drinking. And that was such a loss because he could have had another 20, 30 years of writing.
Yeah, it's really weird though. You'll wake up with these photos on your phone and you like with these strangers, like, whoa, or pieces of the street, like not even proper photos. You're like, what is going on? What was that? It's bizarre.
And bruises.
I always get the bruises. Yeah.
We used to call them UDIs, unidentified drinking incident.
The scariest thing is really what you're talking about with these crimes, either being a victim of a crime or being a perpetrator of a crime. There was that Dahmer, that Jeffrey Dahmer series that came out the other year, and he was always drinking the whole time. He was always drinking these beers, and one of his early murders, I guess I don't want to say the word, is he did wake up in this hotel room with this dead body. He just had killed this guy, and like, what the hell did I just do? He was also giving these people benzodiazepines and other sort of things that also, independently of alcohol, black you out and decrease your memory and increase the GABA and all of that. And actually, sometimes people will mix these two together. Well, maybe we'll talk about that later on. Like there's adverse reactions of how combining certain things together will actually make blackouts even more likely. But yeah, dude, something happening to you or you doing something, that is the most terrifying thing. And women, it's already dangerous enough going out there with your
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex intact through those drunken nights. But now you're a zombie. Now you're sleepwalking, and all those wolves and lions are, licking their lips. And oh my god, this is scary stuff.
Yeah, I heard someone say that during blackouts, the men tend to do things, to other people, like, terrible murders maybe, or something not quite as bad. But the women will get things done to them. So, and it's definitely a risk factor of a blackout being female, because obviously we're smaller and we process alcohol differently. And, I think if you drink quickly, which I always used to do, that's also a risk factor. And drinking on an empty stomach as well. I mean, us women are always on diets, so, and I used to not eat on purpose before a drinking session because I knew that I would get the buzz faster.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the causes, like eating on an empty stomach, being smaller in size. A big one is drinking the alcohol quickly, of course, large amounts.
Hmm.
Yeah, can you talk more about some of these other causes for the purpose of us being able to maybe prevent blackouts? Because yeah, you might have intentionally been fasting in order to get drunk more quickly, but other people, they may or may not be doing it intentionally, but they like, why am I getting these blackouts? But maybe this knowledge could help.
I mean, mixing with meds is definitely a big one. You mentioned the benzos there. I mean, there's a particular, I think it's for anxiety, it's called Ativan. And mixing that with just maybe a few glasses of wine. Most of the people in my community are ladies that were drinking or are drinking a bottle of wine. I mean, that's just their normal evening consumption. But a lot of them are also on antidepressants or anxiety meds. So mixing that bottle of wine with the meds, it's not good. You're much more likely to black out. The sad thing is that drinking alcohol will negate the benefits of your medication. So you're taking antidepressants there, but you're drinking alcohol is a depressant, so they're not working. We've worked with so many people that have said, "Oh, I feel so much better since I ditched the booze because my antidepressants are working after 20 years of them not working."
Yeah, I figured out for myself. I'm definitely drinking really, really quickly. That'll do it, and especially on an empty stomach. I tend to fast here and there, and I don't do it intentionally to get drunk, but I'm pretty sure it does contribute to things like blackouts, and also just drinking over long periods of time. Here in Japan and many countries, people will start drinking at 6 p.m. and they'll finish it 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. It's insane. And these drinks
Yeah.
are not weak. But the most first surefire way I've noticed for myself to black out is combining alcohol with marijuana. I didn't know it at the time that was going to interact in that surefire of a way, but man, I never do this stuff. But like, if I go back to the US, it's like, what can I do here that I can't do in Japan? I'm like, ooh, okay, let's do it. And there's like shops everywhere nowadays, and there's these edibles that are just full of so much THC. And the interesting thing I learned, I dug into it later, is THC. It binds to these CB1, this cannabinoid 1 receptors, and there's a huge density of them in multiple areas of the brain. But one of the areas is the hippocampus, and it starts shutting that thing down. And that's why people are getting high and they can't remember things. So yeah, I'm sure benzodiazepines are probably even more powerful. But yeah, and nowadays in various countries, marijuana is becoming legal or more accepted, and alcohol's still there in the background. So these combinations of the
Yeah.
two, and even CBD. CBD binds to a different cannabinoid receptor, but it also does increase the GABA and those all these areas of your brain. Starts shutting you down and getting sort of this sleepy little state. And then so combining CBD or straight up marijuana, whatever variety, with alcohol, even just a little bit, can like
Mm.
really almost like guarantee a blackout for certain people, maybe for everybody. I don't know. This isn't something we've been talking about, but have you thought anything about all that?
Well, certainly cocaine, mix cocaine with a drinking evening. And what happens is you can carry on. You mentioned drinking till 3 a.m. in the morning. You can drink all night long if you're taking Coke as well, because
Oh,
they fuel each other. And I managed to stay away from the drugs personally, but I know people that coke and booze, that's their thing, and they do have blackouts now and again. So your podcast, when you were on my show, we called it Russian Roulette, and I love that title because that's exactly what we're doing. And I met a lady a while ago, and she said, it's not as if things go wrong every time I drink, but every time things go wrong, I'm drinking. You get it? So it's Russian roulette sometimes. And that is an indicator of a drinking problem, because it means, that our bodies are reacting. Sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's very far from okay.
Yeah. What are some misconceptions about alcohol blackouts that you might want to clear up if you've got any?
Well, when I was young and stupid and 25 years old, I think treating them as a joke is a big mistake, and that's certainly something that these are serious, and I know we feel invincible when we're young, but we're not. I nearly drowned in that bath, so I would have missed out on a long and interesting life. I hate to think that. And indeed, I have a friend whose daughter took ketamine and she did drown in her bath at the age of 20. So, we've really got to be careful. And women, as we've just said, so much at risk of sexual attacks or abuse if they're blackout drunk. Not all men are rapists, but
and they're more at risk of blackouts too, right?
Yes, definitely higher risk factor. And it's so fucked up. Can I swear?
Sometimes you have to swear to get the ideas and the emotions out. So just do what you do.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think it's so fucked up that us women have been targeted by the alcohol industry for 25, 30 years. The story is Philip Morris, him of the cigarette fame, bought Miller beer and looked at the sales, decided they were too flat, they needed more profits. So they segmented society like they do in marketing and identified that the women weren't drinking enough. How can we get women drinking more? So they decided to make it glamorous, and they pinkified it, and they made sure it was in all the movies, and they spent trillions on marketing. And now most women, they think a glass of wine in the evening is self-care, and it's all about having fun with their girlfriends. And we've just been completely brainwashed and manipulated. And what really gets me is the alcohol industry have hijacked the feminist movement, because I remember in the 80s we felt so liberated because we thought, oh, we can drink with the boys, and there were all these wine bars in London, very glamorous wine bars, so we didn't have to sit in the grotty pubs anymore. And we just loved that lifestyle. And some of us, got really caught by it and became dependent. But the mixed messages, and we can't drink like the guys. It's that's why so many women are getting breast cancer. Drinking more than 3 medium glasses of wine a week increases your risk of breast cancer hugely. And when I got breast cancer in 2006, I had no idea it was related to my heavy drinking. So I carried on drinking because I felt rather sorry for myself. I thought, well, I'm going to die, so I might as well have a few drinks. And my oncologist, I asked him when, I had mastectomy, chemotherapy, the whole shebang, treatments for a year. At the end of it, my oncologist said, you've got through this, be thankful. And I said, I am, but I'm also prepared to change my lifestyle in any way you tell me, because I don't want this thing coming back. I don't want to go through it again. So he said, oh, well, my dear, I can still remember his voice, you've been through a very difficult time. And he said, and now, it's your time to enjoy your life. He said, eat, drink, and be merry. There's nothing wrong with the odd glass of wine, he said. But of course, to my addicted brain, he was saying, just go back to your bottle of wine a night and you'll be absolutely fine. So even 2006, which isn't that long ago, there seemed to be no awareness. But more recently, I mean, I have got a friend in England going through this, and she did say that her oncologist actually mentioned it. So they are acknowledging. But the fact that in Canada, the low risk limits, they've reduced it to 2 drinks a week. And they're doing that because the evidence is just undeniable now, and it's stacking up and stacking up. 7 types of cancer and more than 60 diseases. That's what we're risking when we drink too much.
Yeah. So what happened after you after that final blackout? I know now you have this community, anti-alcohol community, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it, Tribe Sober. But yeah, tell us. Let's continue the story a little bit.
How I got sober. Well,
Yeah.
I'll take you back if you like. After the 25-year-old drama, that was all fine. When I was 30, I married a guy who was also a heavy drinker. I met him in a bar, surprise, surprise. We got married. We're both, when I look back now, we were both functioning alcoholics. I mean, high functioning, we had good jobs, whatever. We would come back from work and we'd always have a shot of Jack Daniels, quite a big one. And then the wine would be open over dinner, and it was just kind of normal. We'd go off to work the next day. And then at the weekend, because we had lots of friends like us, boozy friends, we'd have dinner parties, I mean, and they were just an excuse to drink, really, although we would try and cook fancy things. And we'd be there till 3 o'clock in the morning. There'd be bottles everywhere, and it was excessive. Usually one person would pass out or black out or something. But that was so normalized. We're talking about the 80s, the 90s. And we just thought we were living the life. We were working hard, we were playing hard, and everything was fine. And I carried on like that until I got divorced in my 40s. And I married another guy, a French guy, who had a very different attitude towards alcohol. They're rather more sophisticated than the Brits, the French. They think it's something to go with a nice meal, and it always has to be good wine, whereas I would drink anything because I just wanted the buzz. So he was a bit horrified by my bottle of wine a night, at least, drinking, and used to nag me, but I'm a bit of a rebel, so that made me worse, really. But for 10 years, he would say, "You've got to do something about your drinking, you're damaging your health." And I would try, I really would try, because I wanted to stay with him. So I wasn't sure how much he could take. So I kept quitting, and I could last for 2-3 weeks drinking very sensibly. And then I'd have to drink till I blacked out. It would just, because in those days I was using willpower. And now that I know so much more about the subject, I know that you can't do this with willpower alone. You have to work on your subconscious. You have to change the way that you see alcohol until you realize that it adds nothing but trouble in your life for some of us. So I didn't know that, obviously, back then. So the whole of my 50s, really, I was trying and failing. And it's very bad for your self-esteem because you think, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I drink normally like, my husband or some of our friends? So it was quite a dark place in my 50s. And then I got breast cancer bang in the middle of all that. So I was with him trying and failing. And then I had this weekend with the blackout. So after that blackout, on the Monday morning, I woke up and I said to long-suffering husband, "That's it, I'm not drinking anymore." And to be fair to him, he didn't say, I've heard that before. He said, I've never heard you say that before. You always say you're going to cut down. Because during my 50s, I could not imagine my life without alcohol. I thought, well, what a dark and dreary existence that would be. So I thought, if I can only control this thing, then I won't have to give up alcohol. But of course, once you cross that line into dependence, you can't control an addictive drug. You don't hear about people moderating heroin, or it's not possible. But I didn't know that. But I said to him morning after the lost weekend, I said, "That's it, I'm done." So he said, "Oh, interesting." And then he said, "You do realise we're going to a party tomorrow?" And we were. But fortunately for me, it was with two alcoholics who didn't drink anymore. And they'd been sober for years, but they had a nice kind of setup with lots of drinks, but they also had alcohol-free drinks. And I looked at these guys and, they were young, glamorous, youngish. And I thought, wow, maybe it is possible to enjoy life without alcohol. But I trotted along to AA because I didn't know what else to do. So I went to quite a few AA meetings here in South Africa, but it just didn't suit me. Well, it was very male orientated for a start. So I'd find myself, sitting next to some guy that had lost everything. His wife had kicked him out. He'd just lost his job. He's practically homeless. And I would kind of meet these people and I'd think, well, I'm not like them. I'm not that bad. So I would leave thinking, well, I wonder if I really do have a problem. So, and also I found it very negative. I would have to sit there saying, my name is Janet and I'm an alcoholic. And I don't actually believe in labeling myself. So that kind of irritated me. And then they started telling me I was powerless, but as a kind of woman who burnt her bra in the 70s, I didn't like that concept of suddenly being powerless. We're supposed to be empowered, aren't we, us ladies? So it didn't gel with me, their approach and the people there. And I say to people now that I think getting sober is about finding your people. You've got to find people you can relate to. Anyway, they weren't my crowd, but I knew that I had a problem and I had to address it. So I just carried on looking. And I found a one-day workshop in London, where I'm from. So I thought, oh, well, let's give that a go. And amazingly, it worked. It was just a one-day workshop, and they talked to us about behaviour change, and they also highlighted all the dangers. It was run by a nurse who'd worked in one of these last-stage liver wards, of people that are dying from alcoholism. So she had plenty of gruesome stories to frighten us to death. But most importantly, the other people there were people like me. It was all ladies. They had good jobs, nice families, but they were sinking a bottle of wine a night or more, and they knew this couldn't go on. So we connected quite well and all shared our sorry stories. And then we made a WhatsApp group, and I stayed in touch with them. And with their support, I managed to ditch the booze. And then I was about 6 months into my sobriety, and I was hit by this really low mood, like a real depression. And I didn't know what to do because I felt a bit trapped. Everyone, my husband was so proud of me and people were saying, oh, it's amazing, what you've done. And I was even blogging about sobriety and how awesome it was. But I was unhappy. So I thought, oh, what am I going to do? Have I got to just stick with this? So I made a deal with myself. I thought, let me just sit with this and see what happens. I thought, I can't go straight back to drinking until I've given this sobriety thing a real try. So I sat there, and now I call it the void, because it's like a void. You just don't know what to do. But what happened, I gave that a month maybe, and gradually I could feel my creativity coming back, and I started getting ideas, and I'd be out walking, and I'd have to keep stopping and writing things in my phone because I'd get these ideas, and I didn't want to stop getting ideas. And gradually I felt like I was coming back to life. And it's almost, when you go to the dentist and your jaw's all frozen, I think my brain was gradually thawing out. It's probably not even possible, but that's how I felt. And then I got this idea, because my professional background was as an HR director. I've training and development and coaching. I've designed and led hundreds of courses in my career. So I thought, why don't I design a program a bit like the one I went to London? Because there's nothing like that here in South Africa. So I designed a workshop. I stuck it on Facebook. It was booked out within about a day. So I started running physical workshops in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and London. They did really well, and people were getting sober. And then people started saying to me, we want to stay connected with you and with each other, because there were creating quite deep bonds on these workshops, because what happens is you share and you make yourself vulnerable, and people feel relieved that it's not just them with this issue. So that's when I created a membership, and that was 8 years ago. So we do programs, we do master classes, we have a membership, and we do recovery coaching, and we do challenges like the 66-day challenge. Let's hear about your challenge, please, Mike.
Oh no.
Yes, I'm allowed to ask you one question.
I failed. No, there's no failure, but I did drink a few times during the challenge. I wasn't even keeping track of the days, so I don't know if that was playing a role in it. Yeah, so basically anybody who's listening, there's a 66-day challenge. We are in this WhatsApp group, and we kind of encourage each other to kind of not drink for 66 days. And yeah, maybe I drank a few times during that. And maybe we should think about like why did I drink those few times? One of the times was I went up to Sapporo in Hokkaido, and it's like a beer city. It's like famous for beer. It was so hard. Like I don't know. I was like I haven't been there. I've been thinking about going for a decade, and I finally went. They've got a beer museum and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, I have to have this experience. I don't know. Nothing bad happened from this from drinking at that time, and it's actually interesting when you do drink, you're thinking, what was I thinking? I was thinking that I'm going to be sober forever. What am I missing? I'm missing out on all this. Oh, it's not so bad. But then you do face the consequences later. We don't have time to get into all of those consequences. There's lots of them. But yeah, the next day your brain's all fuzzy. You can't think. The ideas are gone. It would be impossible for me to do something like a podcast or even prepare for that while having drink and alcohol in the past few days or something like that. So it takes time to recover. But yeah, I'm kind of babbling on now, but what was the other time? The other time, yeah, you meet certain friends and you're just you cave in, and I'm not going to blame it on them, but you're like, ooh, I don't want it to be awkward, or you kind of do want to drink. You kind of secretly, you haven't decided in your mind that you really want to stop drinking. Maybe I didn't have that big blackout experience, and maybe I need one, perhaps.
So you drank twice in 66 days?
I think I drank 2 or 3 times in the 66 days, which is still not too bad. It would be like once every 6 weeks or something. So it's not a total failure. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. That's pretty awesome. No.
Yeah.
And we choose 66 days. I mean, you'll know more about this than me, because allegedly you can build a neural pathway in that time. So the idea is that you can go on and it gets easier. And we've had, I don't know if you're still on the group, but we've got lots of people that have decided they're going to go on to 100 days because they feel good. So yeah, I think we introduce these challenges because I think even for moderate drinkers like yourself, there you go, you still need to take a break now and again. Because if you take a break, if you can't get through 30 days without alcohol, then you are probably dependent. But if you do dry January, dry July, maybe 66 days now and again, and you get through it without too much pain, then you're probably absolutely fine. But I think just as we go to the doctor once a year to have a medical checkup, let's do a checkup on our alcohol dependency level, because it's so much easier to nip it in the bud to get off that slippery slope before it really gets too steep. And it's a hell of a job to get out of it, I know from experience.
Yeah, it might be something interesting to test on ourselves with other addictive habits that we don't particularly enjoy, or that might be harming us in certain ways. I'm imagining things like smartphones, pornography, other drugs, whatever. It could just be the TV, and just be like, what's life like when I don't do this for a couple days or for a couple hours?
Yeah.
And how do I feel? Oh, how much do I really like this? And how much is it just sort of part of my past and just kind of controlling me? It's an addiction. How free am I? And where do I really want to be? So it's like a little pause button for you to be like, what is going on? Who am I? What do we want to do from here? Do we really like this? Is this really good for me?
Yeah.
And for alcohol, for whatever. So that's another thing I learned from the 66-day challenge is, I could do this with other things as well. It doesn't have to be 66 days. It could be 66 minutes or whatever I want it to be. Yeah, just to whatever gives me the insights into myself and hopefully a bit of a freedom going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a Sober Curious challenge, 30 days, and we say, just try it. Just be curious, be like a scientist in your own life, keep a journal, and just see what would your life be like without alcohol. We need to do that now and again. And something else, I mean, it's interesting what you said about you wouldn't feel up to doing a podcast the morning after you've been drinking, because even if we don't develop a hardcore dependence, I think if we are kind of regular drinkers, then there is a chance that we won't reach our potential, because some of our members, have gone on to do the most amazing things after they've quit drinking and started embracing sobriety, because you get energy and you get motivation and you get a lot of free time, and you actually have the energy to do something interesting with that time, because there's a Groundhog Day element to being a regular drinker. And I used to do it myself. You wake up in the morning and you think, overdid it a bit last night. I won't drink this evening. Get to 5 o'clock and you're thinking, a cheeky glass of wine would be nice. And there you go again. So it's like Groundhog Day. And I was certainly stuck in that for far too long.
It's also interesting what you were saying about how after you had stopped drinking for a period of time, the ideas and creativity and all of these cognitive things started emerging, flowing out of you. So we were talking about blackouts. Yeah, on one side, there's a blackout when you drink too much, or there's a risk of having a blackout where all of these functions are shut down, and I guess your short-term memory is, and yeah. But also, there's sort of the other side of this is like when you're not drinking, all of these parts of the brain and cognitive abilities are increasing. So yeah, it gets me thinking like alcohol might be a kind of a potential blackout tool, or shutting down the brain, shutting down the thinking and executive functioning kind of tool, if that's what you want. Okay. But what are some of these sort of anti-blackout behaviors or foods, or I don't know, supplements or things we can do? Maybe we're stacking on top of the sobriety from the alcohol, but we're also kind of increasing our memory, increasing our cognitive functioning. I don't know what it would be, a whiteout. Not blackout.
Well, it's all about this blood alcohol level, isn't it? So I think certainly food can be very helpful. So I'd say to people, if they're going out drinking, always, have something stodgy, have some pasta or something like that, and you're far less likely to drink too much. And that helps with cravings as well. We have so many people that say, I'm really hit by the wine witch, as we call her, at 6 p.m. And I say, well, just, have a really nourishing snack, because so many of us get used to eating at 8 p.m. in the evening. But sometimes, and when you're doing this, it makes sense to try and eat at 6 p.m. because when you've had a meal, you won't feel so much like falling onto the alcohol, I think. And going back to, we were talking about how I felt my creativity coming back. I interviewed a neuroscientist, a lady called Loretta Broining. And
yeah.
She's great. Did you hear that podcast? Did I send it to you?
Yeah. I've met her. She came to Tokyo and we hung out, and she's been on my podcast. I've been on her podcast. I've been loving her for like a decade. I'm just going to go on a little fanboy rant right now, so I'll try to stop myself. But yeah,
please
amazing.
Go. I'll send it to her. Me too. And in my conversation with her, by that time I was running Tribe Sober and whatever, and happy in my sobriety. But I told her about that low mood that I just sat with. And I said, lots of people in our community, they are hit with a low mood. We call it the early sobriety blues. We even give it a name these days. And I said, is there any way to avoid that? And she knew my story. And she said, well, when we analyse what happened to you, there you were a few months sober, and that's when you got hit with this low mood. And she said, the brain loves a challenge. It needs a project. It needs something to keep it sparking, because, she loves talking about when we were in our caves and the animals, and our brain is wired for purpose, isn't it? To to keep us alive, and we're not really wired to be happy or anything like that. So she said to me, when you stopped drinking, your brain was going, oh, right, we've got a nice project here. She's going to get sober. And as I kind of nailed sobriety a few months in, the brain was going, oh, that's good. We're sober now. What next? And she said, you hadn't planned for what next. Because I just kind of sat there in my sobriety. And frankly, I was expecting to be happy because I was sober. And having worked with Loretta, I know that, you can't just sit there and wait for happiness to strike, because happiness is a skill, as she says in her latest book, Why You're Unhappy. So she said to me that what happened with you, you very wisely sat there patiently, and then you got that idea to start Tribe Sober. And because you had to set up a website, you had to learn about marketing, you had to run workshops, your brain was excited because there was so much happening, and you had a project and you divided it into little steps and you were achieving each little step as you went. And she said that's why your mood improved dramatically, and indeed, I can say that Tribe Sober has been keeping me happy and feeling purposeful for eight years now. So there's really something in that. So before I had that conversation with Loretta, I used to say to people when they said, oh, I'm sober, but I'm miserable, I used to say, oh, yeah, well, that happens. Just hang in there. It'll get better. Now I say to them, get a project. And we even say to new members, your project is to get sober. So treat it like a job. But when you're about 3 months in, recognize that you will need another project, whether it's a fitness challenge or some kind of writing they need to do or crafting. We tell them, even at the beginning, start researching what projects you could have. So I think that was a great lesson from Loretta there. And I'm always grateful to have for explaining that to me.
That's absolutely right. I feel like, well, for myself, the nights I go out drinking, or the periods of my life where I'm drinking more, are when I lack that project, or I feel like I have too much time. Oh, I don't know. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you go out drinking. But if you have that project, that big thing, then you might not need the alcohol. So it's almost like we can't handle the fact of like being like just doing nothing. So no excitement, nothing we're chasing. And then the alcohol kind of like hacks the brain and system to make us feel like, simulate like we have like a little project, but we don't wake up and we're back to where we were, but worse. So yeah. And then, yeah, maybe the blackouts are also, like you mentioned earlier, how you would drink. It almost sounds like you were intentionally like not hoping for a blackout, but like it's sort of this self-annihilation kind of like, I want to just like, boom. It's the opposite of this will to live through this purpose going forward through your whatever Tribe Sober, or through a podcast, or writing a book, or the fitness stuff, or whatever. You're more like, I want to lose myself. I want to not die, but kind of annihilate myself. In this blackout, it's this self-sabotage that you kind of like, that's this a project in itself, is like, let's just not kill myself, but let's try to like zombify myself or something. And that's sort of it's not meaningful to me, but maybe it's the most meaningful project I have. And yeah. Blackouts might be a sort of extreme symptom of extreme lack of purpose or project.
Yeah, I was definitely on a path of self-destruction, and I probably wouldn't be alive now at the age of 72 if I'd carried on like I was. But women, we have this pattern. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of women now, and I'm the same. And in our teens, 20s, 30s, most of us are still drinking for fun, to socialize. When we get into our 40s and 50s, that's when we become working mothers. And that's where all the juggling comes in. And it's incredibly stressful trying to hold down a high-powered job and keep the family at home going. You're just pulled in all directions. So many of us switch from drinking to socialize, to drinking to self-medicate. And that is the danger point, really. And that's why when I work with younger women these days, I just try to help them to see that is the danger point. So if they're drinking to self-medicate, then, please do something about it, because that's that's when the dependence really kicks in and you start drinking more and more. And, whereas if you can just cut it down at that kind of age in the 40s before you get to your 50s, then it will make a huge difference.
How has this changed your social life? Because the more we learn about life and health and the brain and everything, it seems like social connection is it one of the deep kind of pillars of mental and physical health. And it actually, it's interesting because when you're blackout drunk, you are still interacting with people. There are other people there, and maybe their cognitive functioning is working, their memory is working, but yours is not. So you're like talking to them, and you don't remember the interaction, whether negative or positive. So you're putting yourself at risk, like re-engaging with dangerous people because you don't remember them from 10 seconds ago, or you're missing out on the positive people. And it's because these memories are getting messed up, along with a lot of other things, social inhibition, self-control, and whatever, your social life is a mess. You look like you're hanging out with people, you're like running around laughing and doing things, but like actually it's just like there's nothing actually going on. But then when you've been sober for many years and like say you're hanging out with these people in your tribe, what's that social interaction like? How is that different from this? We'll take the extreme example of a blackout social interaction.
Yeah, it's a much deeper connection that I have with my friends in Tribe Sober these days. But yeah, your friendship circle will evolve when you go on this journey. I mean, when I was in my blackout, I was a great hugger, apparently. I would go around hugging everybody. So I suppose that's better than punching everybody, but probably not the best. So yeah, that weekend, the lost weekend, I was with my drinking buddies, people I used to hang out with a lot. And when I stopped, I mean, they thought it was very strange indeed. And then a couple of them decided, because they would keep in touch with me, they'd kind of watch me with great curiosity, and they'd say, "You're still doing that not drinking thing. When are you going to start drinking again?" So gradually they realized I was serious, and a couple of them kind of followed me. But one lady who was, probably as dependent as I was, certainly, and she, told me I was crazy and she didn't want to hang out with me anymore, so that was fine. But interestingly, about 6 months ago, she contacted me and she said, my drinking's just got worse and worse, and it's blackout after blackout. And she punched somebody in her last blackout. And, she's quite a sophisticated lady. And she was just so kind of horrified. And then she had another blackout where she went to sleep in a dog basket in her friend's house. So they were getting hectic. She said, "I have to stop. You have to help me stop." So now she's joined, Tribe Sober, and we're helping her stop. And interestingly, I'm going to have lunch with her. She's the one, because she loves good food, and she's got this, because we all have these limiting beliefs about alcohol. My big one was, I'm going to lose all my friends. And indeed, I did lose some of my friends, but then I made, I don't want to say better friends, but more deeper friendships. But this one, I kind of kept in touch with her over the years. But she's got this deep limiting belief that she cannot enjoy a good meal without several glasses of excellent wine. So she invited me out to lunch today, and she said, "You've got to help me rewire that limiting belief that it is possible to have lunch without good wine."
Yeah. So there's that day when you told your husband at the time, we're going to leave in a second, don't worry, that you're going to stop drinking. And then a little bit later, you created Tribe Sober. Looking back on it now and seeing how your life is, seeing how these relationships are, your health, your thinking, your creativity, etc. You probably had an imagination of what it was going to be like, but now looking back, how is it like a little bit different, better or worse, or just different than maybe how you might have imagined it would turn out when you first started this plan of Tribe Sober?
Oh, it's about a million times better than I imagined. And that's one of the difficult things about early sobriety. You just cannot imagine how your life is going to evolve. And we like a book in our tribe. We always recommend it. It's by a sobriety advocate lady, and she's called Laura McCowan, and it's called "We Are the Luckiest." And the premise of that book is that those of us that have been forced to the wall by addiction, we've had to deconstruct, rebuild our lives. But we are luckier than the moderate drinkers that carry on, chugging away their 2-3 glasses a night, and they never reach their potential. And we've kind of bought into that thinking, and we now say to people that join Tribe Sober, looking very depressed as I was when I thought I'd have to give it up, and we say, don't be depressed. You haven't got a problem here. You've got an opportunity. You've got an opportunity to open up your life in ways you cannot imagine right now. Just have faith and hang in there. So, and the other thing we tell people is that you're going to gain so much more than you lose, because our fear that we're going to lose things like friends, the ability to have fun, to relax, keeps us trapped. But in fact, once we do get sober, we gain a lot more than we've lost.
Great. So if people want to connect or learn more, or perhaps join the tribe, where can they go?
Tribesober.com. And then I've got the podcast. Podcast is called Tribe Sober, Apple, Spotify. You're on one, Russian roulette. Yeah, it's got about 1,500 downloads.
Oh, is that average? Is that below average?
No, it's a bit above average at this time.
Ooh, I'm above average finally. Great. Yeah, but just type in Tribe Sober anywhere on any search engine, whatever. Lots of things will pop up. You also write lots of articles and do events, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. So yeah, great. Thank you so much, and hopefully this will keep me off the booze for another couple weeks, and then we'll have to. I guess eventually you have to join the tribe, or you have to make your own tribe. Otherwise, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, we'd love to have you in our tribe. We're getting more and more guys. We've got a guys group now because there's so many of them. It's lovely.
Actually, that's one final question. This is my bad habit of throwing a weird question on at the end. Is why is it that there's so many more women in Tribe Sober and a lot of alcohol communities that are not Alcoholics Anonymous? Why are there so many women in these tribes?
Because we're prepared to share, to be open, and to be vulnerable. You guys, you're brought up as little boys, to be tough, aren't you? You're told not to cry, and whereas, we're allowed to express ourselves more. So when guys do join us, they struggle to start with, because we've got this WhatsApp group with about 60 guys on it. And if you see a conversation going on, you kind of jump on it. My God, the guys are talking. We have to encourage them. I had to put, we've got a member called Lucy who used to be a railway engineer in the UK. So she's always worked with men, and she loves hanging out with guys. So she's one of the boys. So I put her in there, to get some conversation going, and she manages it sometimes. And they're always very good with new people. They'll welcome them and whatever, but it doesn't come so easy for men to be in a community of strangers. They feel more comfortable in their own gangs, talking about sport and drinking their beer.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. Keep in touch and see you around.
It was a pleasure. We will.